If you have to stop and think about whether or not you need a Chevy Suburban, then chances are you probably don't. More so than a pickup truck or even a proper full-size luxury SUV like the Cadillac Escalade, this definitely isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And come to think of it, it's probably not going to fit in a lot of places you might expect, like, say, a parking spot. This beast might not be for everyone, but for those who do have a genuine need, this latest version packs an awful lot of usefulness and utility inside a pretty sensible package. Okay, so here's where I stand on the Suburban. As someone who doesn't have kids, I can't quite picture where I would have to be in my life where this would actually land on my shopping list, but I'd have to imagine it's some sort of seventh heaven situation, or at the very least, you seriously like the idea of some excess in your driveway because this thing is huge. And to tell you the truth, I do feel a little bit embarrassed driving around in it by myself. It's just so massive. But then again, that makes it pretty great for family life, especially if you have a whole bunch of kids and you don't want to drive around in a minivan. This really is a great alternative. Now, even crazier is that in this latest version, Chevy has actually added even more space to the inside, though it's not much bigger overall. It's only about 1.5 inches longer, but more importantly, Chevy has stretched the wheelbase about 4 inches, and it now rides on an independent rear suspension. And what that means is, yeah, it's inherently more comfortable, but also there is all kinds of extra space for you and your stuff to get comfortable in here. So how much extra space are we talking here? Well, cargo room behind the third row of seats is about the same as it was before, though that's not a bad thing, and there is a ton of it. But when you fold those seats down, you get about 500 liters more space than the previous version of the Suburban. And to put that in perspective, that is about the same as adding a mid-size sedan's trunk worth of space to the inside. And you get a little bit more than that when you fold the second row seats as well. And Chevy even managed to add a couple inches of legroom to both back rows of seats, and I can fit in the third row quite comfortably. Obviously, the second row is just a little bit better, but I can fit, and that is a big testament to the space in here. Now, second row headroom, it isn't great with this sunroof, but if you have kids back there, they're probably not going to notice, and it's only me, who's about 6'3", that has a problem with it. Otherwise, it's not so bad. But the thing I like most about this Suburban is that I can actually climb into the back fairly comfortably. I don't feel like the guy in the Shawshank Redemption in his tunnel like I usually do in an SUV. Yes, even full-size ones like this, those door openings are huge. No, this isn't a minivan, but it's a pretty close second. And then up here, well, hey, what can I say? This thing is based on a truck, and you can definitely tell by how much space there is, especially when it comes to shoulder room. More than enough room to separate you and the person next to you, and this center console is huge. I'm pretty sure you can even option the Suburban with a bench up here if you'd rather have 3 seats up front, though I dig this. And the cool thing too, you can move this console front or back, and it's motorized. You just use this button up here on the ceiling. Pretty cool feature. Now, since you subscribe to the channel and you've already watched both my GMC Sierra and Chevy Silverado reviews, you'll notice that the space up here looks and feels just a little bit different. And a big reason why is this touchscreen up here on the dash. See, both of those trucks, they use the old style of head unit that you got in the last Suburban, where it's tucked into the dash and it's a little bit small. But this new generation uses a 10-inch screen, and it sits a little high on the dash. I know that's not everyone's style, but I actually think it works really well. It doesn't stick up too high, and the size is just right for this cabin. Something I really like in here, well, both Android Auto and Apple CarPlay connections are wireless, and that is standard in every trim. And everyone but the base gets a wireless charger to go with it, which is very convenient for connecting on the go. But you can also charge it up using both USB-A and USB-C ports, and there are a whole bunch of them throughout the cabin, even in that third row, which I love to see. And you know, GM's infotainment system, it might not be my favorite on the market, but it is fairly straightforward to use. You get these circular icons for all the features, and the screen itself is fairly responsive. My only complaint is that it does look a little bit milky and washed out, though that might have to do with these screen protectors, because I have the same thing going on with these rear seat entertainment screens. Both of those are touch as well, and when you look at them, there's a bit of a sheen to them, and I do think they might be the screen protectors, but they don't look all that great. They're definitely not as crisp as others on the market. Now, to tell you the truth, I do find Chevy's controls just a little cheap and chunky, but I like the fact that there's all kinds of physical switchgear. Down here for HVAC and audio, as well as over here a bunch of truck stuff by my left knee, even buttons up here on the headliner, and it's all very easy to read and understand at a glance, and that I do like. Now, you guys know the deal. I usually drive the most expensive trim because automakers like to put their most impressive stuff out there, and that's true of this Suburban. This is the high country trim, and it starts right around 86 grand before tax. That's a little bit cheaper than the most expensive version of the Ford Expedition Max, but here's what bugs me. It's not quite as fully loaded as you might expect. Yes, there's all kinds of good stuff like leather upholstery, heated and ventilated front seats, a decent stereo, heated rear seats, you know the deal. But if you want this sunroof, the tow package, even adaptive cruise control, you've got to pay extra. And then this one I'm driving, well, it has a bunch of other stuff like these massive alloy wheels or that rear seat entertainment system, and it's a hair less than 100 grand before tax. That is a lot of money. Now, in the Expedition Max, you do have to pay more for a rear seat entertainment system or a tow package, but stuff like a sunroof or adaptive cruise control comes standard in the top trim, and so do massaging seats, and that's not even a feature you can get in the Suburban. That is a big bummer for a six-figure SUV. I'm assuming GM is trying to keep some separation from the Cadillac Escalade, but I don't like that at all. I do think you should be able to get them in here. It also doesn't necessarily feel quite as expensive as it is, but that's always been the case with the Suburban. It's a bit like a technical jacket from Arc'teryx is going to cost you the same as a wool coat from a label like Ted Baker. You're not paying for fashion there, you're paying for function, and that's the same thing with this Suburban. It's not necessarily toughness, but you're definitely paying for confidence and capability. And speaking of capability, as this one is spec'd, it can tow 7,900 pounds. So plenty for any type of boat or travel trailer you might want to hook up to the back. Now, when you step all the way up to this top trim, you get two engine choices, and they cost the same no matter which one you go with. There's a straight six diesel, and that is definitely the one that I would pick, or this massive 6.2 liter gas-powered V8 that replaces the 5.3. And don't worry, even if you go with a cheaper trim, the diesel engine is only a $2,000 upgrade here, and it is highly recommended. It is a fantastic motor. If you go with this 6.2 liter, well, you're definitely not going to win any awards for efficiency. It's officially rated at 14.6 liters per 100 kilometers combined, and that is premium grade gas. Now, earlier this week, I was doing pretty good. I was in the low 12s, but that was with a lot of highway driving. Now I'm a lot closer to that official average since I've been driving a bunch around town. And that is worse than that Silverado I just drove with this same engine. Now, either engine is a good match for the Suburban, but don't forget, this thing tips the scales at about 6,000 pounds. So it's not quite as impressive when you spin the drive dial into sport mode and stomp on the gas as that Silverado is, but it's still nice and smooth when you roll onto the accelerator, and it sounds pretty good too. 6.2 liters of thunder. I know this is a bit of a dinosaur, but I still love the sound of a naturally aspirated 8-cylinder. The ride quality is incredibly smooth too, and the big reason why is this one I'm driving has both magnetic ride control and optional air suspension that makes this more comfortable than proper premium SUVs out there, and I'm talking most of them too, not just a few. Even the unsprung weight of these massive wheels isn't a problem. It smooths them right out, and there's barely any body roll. I'm very impressed considering the size of this thing. I thought for sure I was going to have all kinds of problems, especially over potholes and stuff, but it is perfectly dialed. One complaint I do have, I wish this steering had just a little bit more heft, especially on center. It feels way too light for a vehicle this big, but that does help when you're parking, which is a major plus in something this big. Now, the other cool thing about this air suspension is that if you do plan on doing anything serious with your Suburban, you can raise it up so that there is 10 inches of ground clearance. But then you can have it set so that it automatically drops down to 6 inches of ground clearance, which makes it a lot easier when you're getting in and out of this thing. And these deployable side steps, well, they're supposed to do the same thing, but honestly, I find they just get in the way. They don't drop down quite quick enough for me. And the other problem is I keep hitting my shins when I go to get inside. Maybe if you're a little shorter than me, it's not going to be a problem, but I have a pretty long stride, and that makes them very annoying. And the other thing to keep in mind is that this is a very large vehicle, so even with that air suspension in its lowest setting, it's not going to be quite as easy to load the back as it is to load up a minivan. Don't forget that lift-over height is much higher, but something I do like is that the tailgate glass can be opened separate from the tailgate, so if you just want to reach in and grab something out of the back, you can do that. I love that. Totally underutilized. It was something that's on the Bronco Sport, and I praised it, and I'm going to do the same here because I absolutely love it. Something else I'll say though, if there's ever a vehicle on the market that needs to be loaded up with all kinds of advanced safety features, it's one as big as this Suburban. But only forward collision warning and auto braking come standard. And that means you've got to pay more for pricier trims or packages if you want stuff like blind spot monitoring and lane keep assist. But even worse than that is adaptive cruise control is only optional on the top 2 trims. And I can't imagine paying even 61 grand for the base model with rear wheel drive and not even being able to option adaptive cruise. To recap, I like the Suburban's mellow demeanor, how much extra space Chevy crammed inside it, and the ride quality. I don't like that adaptive cruise is only available at the top 2 trims, that you can't get stuff like massaging seats, or how inefficient the 6.2-liter engine is. Okay, so if you're buying one of these, you're probably not quite as concerned with efficiency as I am, but if you are, you're going to want to head straight to that diesel engine. You're also going to know better than I do whether you genuinely do need a Suburban in your life, and if you have to spend too much time thinking about it, then you probably don't. But if you do, this latest version delivers way more space for people and stuff than ever before, but the good news is, it's still just as sensible as ever.